All right, welcome into SportsBit Betting Insights today, Wednesday, February 24th. We'll run down the line movers, big game breakdown. The deep dive topic of the day is the Combine. And, of course, we close with a play of the day. How you doing, Teddy?
I'm doing all right, Paul, but I know that you've got a rant today. You want to bitch about the UFC, which is, in my mind, a pretty easy target to bitch about.
Yeah, less is more, and they're making a big mistake, and Dana White's making a mistake, and this has been going on 2 years. They've done this now. So once again, you have another big injury in camp. Dos Anjos pulls out as he broke his foot. Now it's going to be Diaz against McGregor March 5th in the main event. Your roster isn't strong enough or deep enough to do all these cards. Now, people have always talked about, well, the hardcore fan will buy all the pay-per-views. Well, not so fast. That was back in the day when you weren't doing two every month. Now, between the UFC on Fox, FSR cards, they are doing 3, 4, sometimes 5 cards a month. Again, I'm a casual fan. I can't keep up. And a couple cards ago, I only recognize 2 guys on the entire card. Less is more. Stop with the greed. It's killing the UFC, and it's hurting the casual fans who tune in and they don't even know who these guys are. And you're going to have so many injuries in camp, it's bound to happen, that you don't have enough star power and your roster isn't deep enough or stacked enough where you can just plug somebody in. So they've had to cancel cards or move them off pay-per-view onto free TV. Do about 10 a year, stack them, and that's your pay-per-view, and that's how you should brand it with the UFC. They're making a big mistake.
Let me ask you this, Paul.
Yep.
Because let me just jump in here as a quick question. Because again, I am not a huge UFC fan, but we talk about the NFL, and the NFL plays too many games. Talk about the NBA and the NBA, the 82-game regular season. You know, the advanced new biometrics show how bad it is for players. You know, we have all of these situations where the schedule is what it is just because that's the way it's always been. And for UFC, these guys are printing money right now. What incentive do they have to make fewer cards and have less income, even though it would make for better fights?
Well, they didn't do that back in the day. You don't think pay-per-view buys would go up as if they've been going down lately? You don't think pay-per-view buys would go up if they had a stacked card and they did maybe 9 or 10 a year instead of maybe every month or twice a month?
Sure, they probably would, but the difference between doing 8 or 10 a year and doing, 16 or 20 a year is bigger than the difference that you would get by doing fewer fights and getting more pay-per-views. Don't you think?
I think I would stack the cards, and I also the free TV stuff too. They're doing a lot of those every month. I can't keep up, and I used to really watch all the cards in order the pay-per-view. I tuned out a while back. I can only if it's Rousey, maybe McGregor or a St. Pierre, or someone like that I'll get involved and shell out the $60 for the pay-per-view, whatever it is.
They've lost me.
Yeah,
that's the key, Paul, is the superstars, the guys who are, who a fan like me would be familiar with, the guys who you like. What the UFC needs to do, clearly, is create more superstars, and you can't do that without having more fights, can you?
Well, I just think they're making a mistake.
I got you. I got you stammering over there, Paul. Do I got you on this one?
You can. I have to do more cards to find a star. Can I just build somebody up and say, hey, this guy's 5-0. He's been on some of the undercards, and I'll take a look at him? I mean, they can make a star out of whoever they want if the record's there.
True that.
All right. Time for bad beats and wrong sides. Bad beats. This was brutal, Teddy. Old Miss, another one. Again, we've just doing this for 2 weeks. Old Miss up 16 with less than a minute laying 10. What happened?
Well, they're supposed to dribble out the clock. And Ole Miss empties the bench. Missouri empties the bench. All the subs come in. And what happens? Three-pointer, turnover, three-pointer, missed free throws, three-pointer. Boom. All of a sudden, a 9-0 Tigers run in 27 seconds. And guess what? There's Andy Kennedy. Instead of leaving everyone on the bench, there's everyone coming back off the bench into the game. Just like we saw with the Warriors game the other night against the Clips. The subs came in. The ticket went to crap. If you had Ole Miss, that was truly a tough beat last night.
Plenty of wrong sides and bad bets, and a lot in the SEC. Florida And LSU's not even going to make the tournament here with Ben Simmons. They lose again, run out at Arkansas last night.
Yeah, Florida, LSU, Alabama, three wrong sides in SEC action. But the
Yep.
LSU one is worth talking about for a minute here, Paul, because look, if all LSU was going to get out of Ben Simmons is an NIT bid,
Mhm.
you have to think that this season has actually hurt the program more than it's helped. Who's going to go to LSU now? If you're the next Ben Simmons and you can't even get in the big dance and play for all the marbles, you really going to go to LSU?
Yeah.
Not a chance. Teams like LSU and LSU in particular, a program without a storied history of success in the post Shaquille O'Neal era, when someone like Ben Simmons comes around, you got to get wins. And the fact that they went last night and got their asses kicked, I mean,
Yeah.
a complete no-show on both ends of the court. That's not a good sign for that program moving forward.
Well, yesterday on Big Game Breakdown, we said be careful here with Ohio State. They have struggled against the top teams in the Big Ten. What happened? Blown out against Michigan State.
Yeah, same story. Ohio
Yep.
State has been a bad bet every time they've stepped up in class. What about another Big Ten team, Rutgers? Yeah, I mean, did you see Minnesota jumping around after they had pulled off the upset over Maryland? I mean, that team was sky high. They were ripe for an upset, but they face Rutgers and they blow them out again. Rutgers seems to be a bad bet in every game. And we got to go to the NBA here, too. What about the Pelicans? Now, here's a team. They made the playoffs last year. We highlighted Anthony Davis on the show yesterday. Boy, they're just not stringing wins together in 2016. Bad loss at Washington last night.
And I was dead wrong on Gentry. I thought he was a good coach. I thought he'd do a better job than Monty Williams. They've had a lot of injuries, but that hasn't been the case. All right, market report and line moves. Let's start with the big one. Number 1 against number 5, Villanova and Xavier. In this one, the total's gone up from 143.5 to 145.5. And Teddy, Xavier was favored. Now money coming in on Villanova.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not surprised. We're going to break this game down in Big Game Breakdown in just a few minutes. But when we do that breakdown, I think it'll help explain the Villanova money, the heavy Villanova money that's come this morning. What about the Badgers? Wisconsin is a
Yep.
team we've talked about a fair bit on SportsBit in recent days. They opened as 8-point underdogs at Iowa. That's been bet down to 6.5. Total holding at 138. It's worth noting the Badgers have dominated this series in recent years. Iowa doesn't have a win or a spread cover against Wisconsin in the last 5 meetings.
And a big one in the Pac-12. Money coming in on Colorado. They're at home against Arizona. They're on the bubble, a game they have to have after they were swept on the road. Arizona down from 6 to 5 in that one. And the Grizzlies and the Lakers. Got to go against the Lakers, right, Teddy?
The markets sure are. Money coming in against LA. The bigger move here has been on the total. This game's been bet up to 209. Think about the Grizzlies.
Yeah.
Slow it down, muck it up. We're not going to get into track meets with anybody. Grizzlies. They got a total of 209. Of course, Memphis is 10-1 to the over. Their last 11 at home. We've also seen some early money for North Carolina over NC State. The Wizards were favored over the Bulls for a few minutes, but now they're plus 1.5, even plus 2s popping up in that game.
Big game breakdown coming up next. Xavier, Villanova, Golden State, Miami, and OKC and Dallas. That's coming up on SportsBit. Betting insights today. All right, time for big game breakdown. 2 top 5 teams go at it, Villanova and Xavier. Now, this has been a mismatch. Welcome to the Big East, punks. Since Xavier joined the Big East, Villanova is 6-0 straight up in ATS. They played earlier this year. It was a 31-point rout. The line was 6.5 in that game. If you look at this graph and these numbers, it's astonishing. They played in the conference tournament. Villanova was 7.5. They won by double digits. They also were laying 2 on the road, won by 12. They had a home game. They were laying 9.5, won 88-75, a 7-point win. And also they kicked it off with an easy win, 81-58, laying 9. So since Xavier came into the Big East, Teddy, Nova's 6-0 against them, ATS and straight up, but they beat them by a combined 103 points. Killing this team.
So far they have, and that's 17.2 points per game. Villanova's been better than Xavier. And again, when you look at the lines on that graphic, everyone's in single digits. You're not seeing the markets say there's a vast differential between these two teams, and we're certainly not seeing that for tonight. But when you look at this picture, I mean, Trevin Blewett and the Musketeers really had a deer in the headlights look when they got wiped out by 31 at Villanova earlier. That was New Year's Eve. It was by far the worst game of the year that Xavier has played. And let's not forget, there is a ton of experience in this series between these two teams. When we look at the Xavier side, you've got 6 different guys that have played at least 60 minutes against of floor time against Villanova in their careers. 4 of them have more than 100 minutes of playing time. You look at the Villanova side, look at these 4 guys with all of whom have 120 plus minutes of floor time against this opponent. So these two teams know each other really well. Now we know in terms of talent, Xavier in theory, they're supposed to be good enough to win this game. But the key to tonight's handicap is weighing just how much these past results are going to impact the psyche of these players. Is this a situation where a team in basically a pick 'em price range is going to go on the floor, yet their mentality is, we're not just dogs, we're huge dogs in this game, we're going to be lucky to compete? Or is this the spot for Xavier to exercise those demons and a talented group that is so fed up with how bad that they've played against Villanova in the past that they're going to play at a level that's not just A, it's AAA. And I'll tell you what, Xavier's AAA game is pretty darn good.
Yeah, can't wait for this one. 24-3 against 24-3 coming up later tonight. To the association, game number 2, Golden State at Miami. Golden State laying 8.5. No Bosch. Check the status of Deng in this one. Teddy, here's one of the best bench in the league against a team that doesn't have any depth. How important is that going to be tonight with Golden State?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a fascinating matchup here because the Heat were able to battle with Golden State in the first meeting between these two teams. They covered the number. I believe they covered it wire to wire. It was a 3-point game in the fourth quarter. Golden State got the win, and there was a stretch there that Miami backers were sweating a little bit. But the fact that Miami was able to compete at Oracle certainly is a step in the right direction. But you're absolutely right when you talk about the bench issues. Look at Miami. In their last ball game, Justice Winslow, Hassan Whiteside, Dwayne Wade, Lowell Deng, Goran Dragic all played 37 plus minutes. There is not anything going with this bench. Talk about Udry out. You talk about Tyler Johnson out, Chris Bosh, Deng a question mark. So you have a team with enormous depth against a team that has an extremely shallow bench. But when it comes to pace in this ball game, I mean, look, Spoelstra's looking at his bench. All he can do is pray. That photo shows it very clearly. But when it comes to the pace here, the Warriors number 2 in the NBA in pace. Sacramento's number 1. Golden State wants to push the tempo. Miami ranks number 29 in pace. They don't run against anybody. And we've seen them step up the pace a little bit in recent weeks when they were so shorthanded that they had to do something to try to generate offense. I don't think Eric Spoelstra is going to try to do that against Golden State. So even if the Heat have personnel deficiencies here, perhaps their ability to control pace may give them a chance to hang around in this one.
Yeah, maybe frustrate them. I remember that Christmas game where it was low-scoring game. Golden State got the win against Cleveland, but they didn't play well and looked like they were frustrated in a weird half-court game in that one. So the final game, OKC in Dallas to take on the Mavs. OKC laying 5.5. What has happened here since coming back from the break? 2 home losses. Can I trust Billy Donovan to figure this out, Teddy?
And that's a good question at this stage of the game because, look, one thing that I don't think people are really paying attention to is how bad Oklahoma City has been against the spread. This team hasn't been bad. They have been a freaking disaster. They're 22-34 against the spread overall. The only team in the NBA that's worse is Phoenix, god-awful Phoenix. We talked about them on yesterday's show. How about this? On the road, here's Oklahoma. OKC taking money again tonight. They're an NBA worst 7-17 against the spread on the highway. Now, look, they're the number 1 team in the NBA in rebounding margin. They're the number 2 team in the NBA in points per game. You say, what the F is wrong with this team? I'll tell you what's wrong with them. They're not playing defense. Andre Roberson's injury. And Roberson is a guy who does not move the needle even a little bit, Paulie. He got injured. Everyone goes, ho hum. Who's he? Who's Andre Roberson? Guess what? He's their best wing defender since he's been out. They have been ridiculously bad defending opponents, particularly from the 3-point line. That can be a problem when laying 5.5 on the highway against a good good 3-point shooting team like Dallas, a team that has actually matched up fairly well with OKC in many recent meetings.
Good break.
Recent meetings.
You got it. You got it. Good breakdown. Up next, deep dive and topic of the day, the combine. Trust your eyes, people. All the mistakes made over the years. We'll get to that and play of the day coming up on Sports Pit. Betting Insights today. Back on Sports Pit, Betting Insights today. Time for the deep dive and the topic of the day, the combine. The underwear Olympics, as I like to call it. You gotta trust your eyes and trust the tape. I don't want any Mike Mamulas here or some guy who does a great workout, bench press, whatever, and teams fall in love with him. Teddy, what do you think of the combine?
I mean, it's the same story every year. They always see these guys jump up at the combine, risers, they call them. And the measurables are really strong. You have a good long jump, you get a couple of extra bench presses, you run really fast, and that's how you see things like, Darius Hayward-Bay get drafted ahead of Michael Crabtree, or some guy named Jamarcus Russell end up being the number one overall pick in the NFL draft. We see it every year, Paul. Guys that did not get the job done at an elite level in college, guys who were average college players, guys who, if you watch film of them at a collegiate level, you're not going to say, this guy's a first rounder, this guy deserves to go top 5. And every year, teams start falling in love with these guys. Look at Nelson Aguilar. Last year was the big riser in the combine. Okay, played for a blue chip program at USC. No question, he had a ton of talent. Drafted by the Eagles. Eagles needed receivers last year. What did he get? 224 receiving yards as a rookie, a complete non-factor. And he's just one of dozens, Paul, dozens of guys that we can talk about. Yeah, they were okay, but not elite in college. They had a great combine. Guess what? They got drafted too high.
I love bringing up Jamarcus Russell. Look at his arm strength. He can throw the ball 60 yards from his knees. Who cares? He's not accurate. Big deal. I mean, Jamarcus Russell stands out. How about Troy Williamson, who was supposed to replace Randy Moss in Minnesota? Oh, look at his 40 time. The kid's so fast. One problem, he can't catch the ball. And then how about Matt Jones is another one.
Yeah, there's no shortage of them. You can look in the last couple of years. The Eagles move up. Danny Watkins is looking good in the combine for Baylor. And then we're talking about offensive line guys or defensive line guys in particular. But really, anywhere. But Watkins gets drafted by the Eagles. He was a huge jumper. Bang, they cut him after 2 years. Bartavius Mingo has this great combine. He was okay at LSU. He never stood out. Then he ends up being the 6th overall pick for the Browns. Let's see. He started 14 games in 2 years. He has 7 sacks. The combine risers are your number one bet against type of guys. It's like, look at your eyes. And with the quarterbacks more than anything else, Paul. And one thing, let's focus on quarterbacks here for a minute. With the quarterbacks, for God's sakes, we've watched Christian Hackenberg for the last 3 years. Okay. Hackenberg, I know that he came in. He was supposed to be all that. He wasn't. He isn't. And now watch him have a good combine and start moving up the charts. And some team's going to draft him too high, and they'll get screwed, just like all the teams that reach when it comes to NFL picks.
You're right about that. Someone will reach and take a quarterback too high. 4 quarterbacks could go in the first round, and the big name is Carson Wentz out of North Dakota State, a big kid. Mike Mayock compared him to Andrew Luck the other day. This guy could go top 5 or even at number 2, the number 2 pick in the draft. I've seen the kid play 2 times.
Yeah, well, see, that's a different story. And I think that Joe Flacco kind of set the bar higher for guys who have the NFL measurables, didn't play at a powerful D1 school, but have gone on to have productive and successful NFL careers. But then again, Flacco wasn't the first QB taken. He wasn't taken number 2 overall. Wentz is one of these guys. If you need a franchise quarterback, you got to take one. But when you think about how much a franchise quarterback failure sets back your organizations, man, sometimes you
Yep.
say, yeah, well, maybe we will have to start Charlie Whitehurst this year. It makes more sense to go with a lesser guy as a stopgap measure than to blow your draft on a bigger name quarterback that really doesn't have necessarily the skill set to move. But let's be real about this, Paul. There are draft busts all over the place every year. And Mike Mayock's a guy who makes his living, and Mel Kiper are guys that make their livings from making predictions with no accountability whatsoever.
Yep.
Not quite like handicappers. There's no, they make bust after bust after bust. Don't go overboard with the hype on a lot of these guys. Everybody's got upside, everybody's got downside. And most of the success at the NFL level comes to A, are you drafted into a good situation? And B, what's up here, not what the physicals are going to measure at the combine.
Very good. Kuiper loved Jamarcus Russell, and Mayock didn't like Cam Newton at all. So that's something to factor in as well. All
They're
right.
wrong all the time, dude. They're wrong year after year after year on, I mean, like from everything from the mock drafts, who's going to get drafted where, to how good players actually are. But they're the experts, and they're on TV again this year.
Yesterday we had the Cubs win total under. Today we're going to a Mountain West Conference game. It's money time. Play of the day. Take it away, Teddy.
Sure is. Let's go to the Mountain West. And obviously, living here in Las Vegas, this is a conference that you and I know well, Paulie. We're going to take a look at the San Diego State Aztecs as short, well, not quite so short, but modest road favorites at Wyoming. And frankly, in the Mountain West, there's only one team that I'm trusting on the road right now. That is San Diego State. They have consistently gotten the job done in hostile environments. And that's very typical of Steve Fisher's team because they do one thing very well. They defend tooth and nail. No easy shots against San Diego State. And that's bad news for a Wyoming team. Paul, you know as well as anyone, Wyoming's not playing good basketball right now. Their offense has been stuck in the mud. They've been losing at home. So, yeah, let's do it. Staying here in the Mountain West Conference, San Diego State -4.5 over Wyoming. A little bit of early Cowboys money has given us a bargain price on this one.
That was a lot of fun. You had me on the UFC rant. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll see you Thursday on SportsBit. Betting Insights today.